I can tell you one thing. Technology is the single most important aspect of every business that has successfully scaled.
It's time for that Real Estate Tech Guy. It's your weekly chance to explore how technology can help your real estate business explode. Each week, you'll hear from real estate investors who have been there and done that, and find out their favorite technology tips. Listen in as Jordan speaks with tech companies and learns about new technologies and new ideas that will help you scale your business. And now, join your host, Jordan Samuel Fleming, CEO of Smartphone, for this week's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy. I'm excited to have my co-host for today, Tiffany High. Tiffany, could you go ahead and introduce all the many ways you interact with the real estate investor ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So Tiffany High here. My husband is not present with me, but Josh High is also my business partner and husband. We own a company called Heels Homes where we actively wholesale, rehab, and own a rental portfolio. We do a little over 300 to 350 deals a year, as well as we own Results Driven REI, where we work with experienced real estate investors on how to build sales teams the right way. I know a lot of people get into this industry thinking that they want to make seven figures, but so many don't realize that you can't get past seven figures without building a team, and that's what our niche is in the business.
Well, and I'm super excited to talk to you today because obviously I've known you guys for a couple of years and I've seen how you work with people, and, what you pointed out there is very true. And it's also very true around the technology element, right? If you're serious about scaling a business, technology is a huge part, right?
Of course. Yeah, I cannot stress that tech has probably, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's been the biggest game changer, outside of also learning how to manage people properly, which is also the second hardest thing I would say that most people have in, not just running in a company in our industry, but any industry.
Absolutely. So now, you've got two hats, so you can kind of switch back and forth, answering however you feel is best. But I'm really, I always like to find out the kind of, you say technology was a game changer. I'm always curious as to how you kind of got to that moment where you realized that proper application of the technology would really bring you guys enormous benefit. What was that journey like for you on either company?
Yeah, actually about 4 years ago now, we had scaled like a decent sized sales team, around 12 salespeople on the phones. And it was quite frankly miserable for a few different reasons. But one of them primarily was that it was like fighting tooth and nail to get them to call over 60 people in one day. And it was also culture problems and management issues and a lot of things that, we didn't learn until getting the right mentor. But one thing that we realized was we take for granted how important our phone system is. And I'm not just saying this because I know you guys own Smartphone, but I stress this in my education program that the tech product that's had the biggest impact on our entire business, even our education business, by the way, is we run a company primarily built on building a phone sales team. So just like most people in the industry, whether it's even mortgage companies, insurance companies, et cetera, we're all built on building phone sales teams. And so when I was getting started in the business, I took for granted the importance of that phone system. And at the time, I had a system where we were hand dialing people. Although it did some recording features and some other things, they were still, taking their hand, pressing buttons, which is ultimately not productive. So I ended up having to walk in one day, and long story short, I had to let go of 3/4 of my staff because I couldn't get the productivity out of them that I needed for the dollars that I was spending. So when that story happened, I took a step back and said, okay, I can either quit now or I can keep going and do this the right way. And one of the first things that we implemented was, how do I make sure that when I bring in a phone salesperson, that I can make them the most productive I possibly can and have the ability to train and coach them through a proper system. So that came through implementing a phone system that allowed them to 5x their productivity. So now we have, 8 salespeople doing 4 times the revenue that I had with 12 salespeople back in the day, simply because of their ability to be more productive.
And let me kind of zero in on that a little, because I find one thing I hear from investors, obviously, I'm not an investor, but I speak to them all the time. One thing I hear when it comes to phone is, the quality assurance, making sure people are doing the right way, keeping on track of that. How does, you could do phone systems many ways, you could do systems many ways, but that's got to be key to your success. So how do you leverage that technology to maintain quality, to make sure that training element is done in the best way?
Good question. So a few different things. We stress the importance of what we call call audits in our industry. And whether you are in real estate, mortgage, insurance, any company that is built around building phone sales teams specifically, you should be doing what we call a call audit process. And a lot of companies, when they get started, what makes or breaks them is that they look at sales as an art instead of a science. But when you get to the philosophy that sales is a science, which is following a check the box process, then that's when scalability becomes infinite. And that is when you have to use the right phone system to support your ability to train. And so when we do call audits, obviously then we need to be recording our calls and using those recorded calls to then coach live alongside somebody. I also, having a phone system that has the ability to have what we call a whisper feature. So when you're on a phone sales team live, your sales team lead or manager, whoever's leading that team, should be on the floor and whispering into different calls so that we have the ability to coach the person on the call so that the person on the other line does not hear it. So for example, in my industry, if one of my acquisition specialists is talking to a seller and I feel like he's getting caught up and can't handle an objection, you'll see my sales manager jump in immediately and start whispering to my sales guy on what to say to do next. So it allows us to train live instead of waiting until after we lost a $30,000 opportunity to train then. I also am a big believer that your phone system needs to have the ability to live transfer. And unfortunately, I see this actually a lot in the mortgage industry too, where people believe in this appointment setting process, which, by the way, anyone listening to this that owns any sizable company that has a phone sales team, if you still believe in setting appointments, you are missing out on probably millions of dollars of revenue because you're not live transferring it. When someone's ready to have a conversation, you should be live transferring that call to a closer. You shouldn't be setting the appointment, giving that person time to think about it, and then either change their mind or contact someone else who's ready to have the conversation. So those are a few key features that I feel like out of the product you need to have. And, there's multiple systems out there. Obviously, we're big advocates of smartphone. It's changed the game for us. And the beauty about it is it's not just our industry. It's every industry that builds a phone sales team out there. These key features are important to leading and helping a team, 1, be more productive, 2, make more money, and 3, build what we call muscle memory. Because as salespeople, it's no different than being in the NFL, the NBA. Like, you don't just keep being the best player. You come in and you shoot layups every day. You shoot free throws every day. And your coaches are watching film with you every week. And those are the types of tools and coaching that we need to continue to keep our muscle memory there to succeed.
I love that. And I think that's really great for, the particularly kind of maybe newer real estate investors who are trying to figure this out, because I feel like there's a lot of expenditure that goes on in systems and in people, right? There's a lot of things if you're serious about investing and scaling your business, you're going to be spending money to get these things right. And that can, if you don't have the experience, you can flounder a little. And what you've just talked about in terms of being able to coach, the idea of, hey, if you've got someone on the line, hook them and get them to someone. Don't say, hey, my guy will talk to you next week on Tuesday. Because, I think that's great advice. Now, let me ask you, because, one of the other key things that I always am curious about, because you have your 2 hats, is I'm always told by investors and successful investors is that the follow-up, right? And, leads, if you're letting a lead drop, you're leaving money on the table all the time. If you follow up 3 times and then go, well, guess this isn't going to happen, you're probably leaving something around. So how do you leverage technology to, of course, sales is a human thing, but technology can help facilitate that. So what do you feel around technology and the follow-up element of a business like yours?
Yeah. So going back to the story of when we had to let go of 3/4 our sales team, a lot of it had to do with they could barely keep up with the leads today, let alone, keep up with leads from the past to follow up with, and where are they? As you continue to grow and do business over time, your leads and follow-up continue to stack. And it is natural in human behavior to just not be able to keep up with where all this stuff is. So you need to allow technology to do that job for them. And so it's not about just implementing, let's talk about smartphone. When I always tell people, it's not about just having smartphone. It's about how you use and set up smartphone that defines how successful you will become. So the biggest thing we do in our training is we talk about the No Lead Left Behind campaign. And it's how we set up our power dialers and our views within our CRM to allow our phone system now to not leave a lead left behind is what I think defines our ability and success to follow up. So that's why 56% of our deals actually come from what we call a follow-up specialist role passed on live to a closer because of the way in which that we set up our power dialer features. Now, before we had those features and abilities in technology, it was human nature that one, someone can only call so many people in a day. And then two, they're like, oh shit, how do I prioritize this? Where are they at in the system? All that. As the owner of the company, you should make sure that both your CRM and your phone system are communicating in a way that allows you to leave no lead left behind. And so it's all about how it's set up, not just having the technology.
Absolutely. Now, let me dive into, you were talking about CRM there. Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure you guys use Podio as your back end. So, of course, Podio can be configured many different ways. I've got lots of people I'm speaking to on the podcast who do it. But in terms of narrowing in your focus on maybe the things you get most out of a CRM or that you're looking to get most out of CRM for your students, obviously the communication element, making sure that that history is there is incredibly important, but that's not the only thing. So I feel CRM is a word people use a lot and don't understand, right? They throw it out there and like, yeah, I got a CRM. And they really have a glorified Excel spreadsheet. They really have a glorified, address book. What do you see as, when you're teaching people or when you're bringing new people into your organization, how do you sort of focus their efforts on the CRM, and what do you think are the most important parts of it?
Yeah, a few things. So when having a CRM, I always tell people, it's not about the CRM itself being like the best CRM, because let's be real, like, Podio, Salesforce is like, the beast of the world when it comes to CRMs. But here's the thing. If you don't have a tech support team to keep up with the ability to continue to develop it as your company grows, it doesn't fucking matter how good Salesforce is, right? And so when I built my community, I understood going into it that technology was one of the number one driving forces that will continue to have them grow over the course of time. And so I think that whoever CRM that you decide to use, customize, whether you subscription, whatever it is that you decide to do, you have to do your due diligence in making sure that the tech support team is there. Because if they lack in your ability to move fast, pivot, and grow as fast as the market, if not faster, then you're holding yourself back, even if the CRM might be the big dog of the industry. So that's why I always say in my student community in particular, one of the things we pride ourselves on is that we've built a massive tech team that when they need something, it is done in 48 hours or less typically. And so I think that that's something important that people need to understand as they take on CRMs. Also, I understand we get into the business, right? We do whatever we can to just go. So there's nothing against that when it comes to getting subscriptions, but just realize that when you press the go button and you just do whatever you think is the most affordable, that it'll cost you more money some other day to fix it, which is okay. We've all been there. So it's all about whatever your budget is. But just know going into this that if you start with a subscription model, which I am not against, but someday you will grow a team and that team will have requests and needs and wants, and the market will change and how you operate and what products you do will change. And so you will need to be able to customize your ability to do business. So in my opinion, I think that you will go places much faster if your CRM can adapt to your needs faster than your competitors. So if you're using the same subscription model as 3,000 other people, then guess what? You're going to move just as fast as those 3 other people. You won't move ahead of them. So that's just a couple of things that I am a big believer on when it comes to CRMs. And then also there are definitely subscriptions out there that do also allow you to customize along the way, which I think is amazing. But you still need then the tech support people to do that work. So I recommend that whatever community you involve yourself in, which I hope that anyone, no matter what business they're running, they involve themselves in a mentorship community to get you faster, further, more money quicker, that they are providing you that type of support and resources, or the referral to find that type of support and resources, or you're just going to move just as fast as everyone else.
That's a real, I've never heard it. Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
A couple other things on the CRM. You need to have a communication log. One of the biggest mistakes we made when we first started the company was that, 6 years ago, someone might have had a conversation with a prospect, and we've been following up with them for over the course of 6 years. And people take for granted how important follow-up is. But 6 years ago, someone might not have been motivated, and then COVID hits, right? And then all of a sudden, 50 of their tenants are not paying rent, so they just became motivated. And if you don't have this communication history stored inside of your CRM, both call recordings, text messages, and to easily understand the history, you won't know how to pick up the conversation to where it was to understand the motivation. Not every time will that hurt you, but it gives you a leg up if you're storing that. Also, having things like quick text or nurture sequences or different ways in which to communicate without you manually having to do it is important in how you combine both the phone system and CRM, so that your system and automation is doing the job, not necessarily just people.
Absolutely. I used to call it the difference between active processes and passive ones. A passive process means you have to look and figure out what you do next. An active one is putting it in front of your face, is making sure that it's driving it to you. And I think whenever I try and talk to people about maybe getting their first CRM off the ground, I usually say, look, you need to make sure it's clean and easy, and you need to make sure it's really simple on the follow-up. If you can get those two nailed to begin with, run it for 6 months, and then you can get complicated, but keep it clean, keep the data tight. How do data is one of my big bugbears. I hate seeing filthy systems full of nonsense data. It makes me twitch in a weird OCD way. Have you found that's a difficult thing to manage in CRMs? Are there things you've learned about keeping data clean or making sure that you get rid of bad data quickly? What are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess one thing if I could go back 6 years and change on how I launched my company and what I do differently now. So let's just say I go launch a new market in our marketing. One thing that I do different is I pay for more expensive data that's stacked and cleaned. And it is what it is. It is more expensive, but we've seen a 20x ROI on it compared to just buying some big list, hoping that it performs. And what I see in our industry, I'm probably going to get a little bit on a tangent on this because I've been seeing it a lot lately, is that people think that they go into business saying, oh, I have 10 grand. So they'll go buy a list, they skip trace it, and they just throw it into a dialer and they hope that it performs and they make this return on investment. And they don't make logical decisions based on data. And so although certain data is more expensive and certain skip tracing, for example, is more expensive, there's a reason why, because it's been proven to work. And we also forget about what we call cash conversion cycles, which is actually greatly getting impacted with the recession right now. So for example, let's say I pull this list. Let's use the divorce list, for example, because typically when a divorce gets filed, they're not necessarily motivated right away. It might take 8 months for the judge to finally be like, hey, guess what? You don't even have an option anymore. You have to sell this house. So they pull this list. They don't have a proper sequence or follow-up, or their system is not properly set up to follow up with it correctly. And so they lose track of all these deals, and then they blame it on the data. And the data is not the problem. The system that you're building is the problem. And right now, more than ever, one of the biggest things getting impacted the recession is if you throw it into, say, a cold caller queue, and they cold call, the lead comes in, they say, hey, I'm ready to sell. On average, it takes 6 to 9 months for you to, one, follow up with that lead, put it in contract in either wholesale or flip it. But when the recession now says, hey, guess what? Houses are sitting for 30 or 60 more days on the market, that 9 months just turned into 12 months. And this is where it makes or breaks people in the industry because they don't understand the impact on cash conversion. And a lot of it starts with the data and then the system and then the follow-up and then the ability to live out and be prepared to pivot and like have cash on hand for all these things going on in between. But anyways, I don't know where we got off on that tangent, but you brought up data, so I thought I would go off on
Well, and another part of data that I actually think is another thing that I don't see enough people do. You know, back when I used to build CRMs for people, which I don't do anymore, thank God. But back when I did, you know, we built a very, very, you know, we were building very, very sophisticated methods, metric tracking for different sources, right? You buy a list, you have got to track the performance of those lists you're buying and those different sources if you're investing in PPC or Facebook leads or you're buying lists, if you're not tracking them and seeing the performance and your return on them accurately, I don't know why I don't know what you're doing, because you're essentially then going, I guess I'll buy something over here. And I feel like that's another area where, you know, if there was an area I want to kind of take people's faces and shove them into is track your sources, track your ROI, track the performance of these things. So, you know, actually in my market, this type of list works better or this type of lead work better. Is that something you kind of focus on quite a bit?
Yeah, I mean, we track anything and everything you could probably ever imagine when it comes to our data. And I think it's not just about the data. I think it's about the salespeople at hand too. A lot of folks, they, you know, start hiring people and then they think, oh, I just have to track marketing metrics or data metrics. And then they don't track their own people's metrics. And so another thing alongside the phone system, which by the way, I am totally against 100% as a leader holding a salesperson accountable for things like talk time and dial count, because when you have a good phone system, dial count becomes an irrelevant KPI to track for them. That doesn't mean that we don't track it as leaders in reports though. And the phone system in particular, along with the data, you have to combine them to say, okay, are there red flag indicators that are happening that'll allow me to make decisions and lead my team better? That doesn't mean that my salesperson should, in our belief, should only be tracking 3 to 4 things so that their primary focus is revenue. But in a reporting, for example, let's say that I have 2 closers, Sage and Connor. And the last 30 days, Connor has outperformed Sage by 2x. Like he's doubled the revenue of Sage, but Sage has talked on the phone for twice as long. So we have to dig in from there and say, okay, is he not following the sales process? What is he calling? Is he on the dialer? What campaigns is he calling? What lists was he calling? Did we have him on new untouched leads? Did we have him on old leads? How do we use the data to make informed decisions so that we can go fix the problem? And too often people don't look to data to make decisions. And it drives me absolutely insane, even on my own team and my own staff, that when people bring me a problem, most times data can give you the answer. So before coming to me with the issue, let's look at the data and the root cause and come up with a solution, or at least 3 variations of a solution that as a leadership team, now we can say, hey, here's the problem. Here's 3 possible solutions that we can dig into. Let's go from here. And like 99.9% of business owners that try to jump into this industry or any industry, they're running around with their heads cut off and they never pay attention to the actual data and what the systems are telling us the problems actually are. And then we go blame it on our people and we create toxic and frustrating conversations. And then we fire them. And then we realize after the fact, oh shit, I was actually the problem because I don't have the right systems in place to make better decisions.
I think that's such a critical point, and it's something, you know, just the you know what you said, because it's not really about data, it's about what the data is telling you. And I see people talk about, again, it's another thing, I see people talk about CRM, I see people talk about KPIs, but what they're talking about is just seeing numbers. And it's like, okay, great. What are those numbers telling me that is making me make a better decision? and that's something I think is an absolute critical. If you're not doing that, the amount of money you may be wasting and the amount of inefficiency you'll have in your organization is simply just enormous.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great point. All right. Well, listen, Tiffany, we've got, it's that time where we get to the Fast Five, Real Estate Tech Guy Fast Five. These are quick hit questions I give to everyone so I can get interesting answers and compare them across everybody. So I'm going to fire those at you. Number one, what tech product has had the biggest impact on your business?
Hands down, smartphone. And I'm not just saying that because you guys own smartphone. I'm telling you that because my business is built off of a phone sales team. And unfortunately, years ago, I did not understand the importance, and the number one asset to our company is the phone system because I am primarily built on a phone sales team. So I went from averaging 60 dials a day per person to now our junior, what we call follow-up specialists, average between 300 and 1,000 dials a day. So my revenue 10x simply from changing the asset in which they're operating on.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Number two, what is the biggest mistake you've made with technology in your business?
I'm going to go back to keep going back to the story because it was the most miserable story I've gone through in business. But at the time, I didn't understand that also a phone system should have an easy way to pull recordings and the whisper feature. And this is how we would operate our sales team. We would be live on the sales floor. We would hear something across the floor. Someone would be having a conversation with the seller. And then as a leader, we'd be like, hey, say this, say this, say this. Now say it that way. But we didn't know what the seller was saying. And so we were creating this friction that impacted our culture internally that then spiraled out of control. People saying, you don't even understand. You're not even listening to the seller and you're in my ear over here physically trying to tell me what to do. And so something as simple as these features of your phone system, at least when running a phone sales team, can make or break and impact your culture. And culture is the number one thing that as any business owner, you should be focused on in general.
100%. I love that answer. Number three, what is your best advice on how to integrate technology into your business? So we're talking about new people, which you see all the time. They're getting into this game. They're thinking about how to start with technology. What's the best advice on how to integrate it into their business process?
So 99% of business owners, typically, at least in our industry, they tap into the industry because they're good at one of two things. They're either really good operators or they're really good at sales. And most of them, they come in because they're good at sales. So they're grinders, they're hustlers, they love to wheel and deal. So technology is actually not their strength. But what ends up happening is they waste a bunch of time trying to click buttons, do all this shit that they don't know how to do, nor should they ever do, to be honest, because it's not their skill set. So if I could recommend anything, it is to outsource immediately to the right people with a tech staff that's bigger than a size of 3, because I see that out there, and then they wait for weeks to get shit done, and join a community where they have a tech support staff that can support you in a way that can help you scale. Because without it, you won't get there.
Love it. I agree 100%. Question number 4, what is one thing, this can go beyond technology, by the way. This is one of those. What's the one thing you wish you had known when you started your business?
I think that, and fortunately, I was in corporate space for 15 years before I started my company, but the majority of people in this industry had never even either one, gone to college, some haven't graduated high school, and most have never even worked in another career for 10, 15 plus years. And experience is what drives the ability to understand the recruiting, onboarding, training, management, and leadership. That is something that like overnight, I can't just snap my fingers and outsource. I actually have to learn and continue to grow my leadership capabilities. And if I could go back, I wish that I would have understood that. So I spent more of my time reading about and grooming myself about becoming a better leader than just like learning the best technology. Because the reality is tech, like I can go to a conference and someone can be like, hey, this is what works and how it works and whatever. And I can duplicate it at the snap of a finger by outsourcing it. You cannot outsource leadership. So if you don't understand how to onboard, train, and manage people properly, like you aren't going anywhere anyway, so it doesn't matter.
And if to take it back to something you said earlier, if you don't understand how important culture is to your environment and your company, it's all going to fall apart anyway. And that comes from you.
Yeah, I mean, culture. So leaders drive culture and culture drives results. And I think a lot of people, especially getting into any industry or starting any business, they forget that they quit people, not jobs. So the reason why they're actually interviewing with you is typically because they're quitting their manager from somewhere else, not necessarily the company. The manager in that team is what's creating the culture and environment that they probably don't like. And so the number one core focus that Josh and I harp at every event, every training, everything, and people think sometimes they think it's like fluffy. And I'm like, no, culture should be your number one priority in building a company. Everything
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Will attract the talent to get whatever needs done versus you wearing the hat. But if you can attract an environment where people feel loved, safe, they have fun, there's positive energy, then they will naturally bring in more talent from each other.
I think that's absolutely perfect. I agree 100. That's absolutely perfect. And it's something that we focus on a lot in Smartphone. And you reap more benefits focusing on culture than almost any part of your business, because you've got a team that is driven and tight together, and they work for each other and they work for you. So I think that's fantastic. Final one before we get to how people can reach you is, now if someone's just starting out, you do talk to people all the time who are at the start of their journey as well. What are, I position this question because there are, any given day, you could look at 50 different pieces of technology that you could implement, right? There are hundreds of ways you could go. But if someone's just starting out as real estate investment, what are 3 technology products you would recommend they bring on? It doesn't have to be brands. It doesn't have to be a specific one. But like in terms of the technology that they should be implementing into their business, what are 3 bits of technology they should look at right away?
If you're coming in the real estate, mortgage, or insurance space, number one is your phone system, because that's, even if you're a one-man show, you need to become the most productive that you possibly can be. And if you're still using your cell phone to make calls, we got a problem. 2, I say this lightly because my first year in business, I did $1 million without a CRM, but I probably could have done way more if I did have a CRM. Keep it simple and implement something that allows you to never leave a lead left behind. And unfortunately, that first year, although we made money, I probably lost a lot of opportunity, because if I called it once and I never called it again because it was literally written on a notepad somewhere. And then 3, I'm going to go back to the CRM again with the third thing, is that I really stress that if you do have the capability and the budget to build a custom CRM first from the beginning, you should do it. And the beauty is, a custom CRM today, you can get done for the same price of 1 year's worth of subscription. So you're going to spend the money anyways. So if you have the ability to do it today, I recommend doing it so that you can build it the way that you want over the course of time.
That's fantastic. And I think that's, the cost effectiveness of building a CRM nowadays is, particularly if you're using a platform like Podio, the cost just isn't really the biggest factor anymore. And I think that's a really good point. Tiffany, you've been a wealth of knowledge. You and Josh have so much knowledge that you bring to everyone. Just to finalize, round this podcast, tell everybody how they can reach you, what you got going on, so they can all benefit personally from your guys' knowledge.
Well, I normally tell people to follow me on Instagram, but Instagram decided to ban me the last 2 days for a reason that I don't know why. So, but hopefully it comes back. And when it does, it's Tiffany High Official and Josh High Official. But you can go to tiffanyandjoshhigh.com. I do want to note that if you are looking to work with us, that we do not work with newbie real estate investors. You have to be doing at least 2 deals a month. If you are, you can go to tiffanyandjoshhigh.com, fill out a form, and we can jump on a call and see if you're a good fit for us. And that's really how to reach me right now, since Instagram decided to throw me off their platform for some reason.
At Results Driven REI.
And we also have Results Driven REI as an Instagram page now as well.
Excellent. Well, as a guy who has no social media anymore, I got rid of Facebook. Aside from, I've got one account so I can do the smartphone. I can look at smartphones and I can look at woodworking. That's all I do. I have no friends. And I got rid of all my social media. I will point everyone towards the Instagram as well as the website. And Thank you so much for your time. I think there's so many gems in here for people to learn, particularly around, that the critical element of building an amazing telephone sales team, and using that resource. So I thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to another amazing episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy. Head over to thatrealestatetechguy.com to check out all episodes and get special discounts on tons of awesome real estate technology platforms.